Hey guys, it's Fan, and today we're going to be talking about the Fialka Cypher. Now, what is the Fialka Cypher? Where was it used? Well, it was used by the Warsaw Pact in Cold War Europe. Um, so used by the USSR and its sister states, nations, places. And Fialka was the cipher, but the Fialka M125 M125 was actually the machine used to encode and decode the messages. So the Fialka cipher machine looked like this. This is actually a no. This is either the 3M or the M. The 3M was one that was used a little bit later, but this is what it looks like. It looks like any other typewriter, basically, except on the inside it's got all of these cylinders here. So if we actually look right into here, we can see all these cylinders, and this is the key to the ciphering. So we've talked about in class the Caesar cipher and how you just like shift letters, and so you're like, oh, we'll just shift three and we'll just do it. Well, the Fialka machine shifted multiple different letters, and so basically you can see. I wish I could actually point, but you can see on this there's all these red letters, and then there's a few black letters. Now, if we just kept those cylinders in place, those 10 cylinders in place, you just type a message out and it would just go right, you just tap vodka comrade, and it would just come out vodka comrade. But what this does is that with every stroke of the key, each individual letter is Caesar ciphered to a different number. And so basically this is like 10 times more difficult to solve than a simple Caesar cipher. And so all of these get switched around and changed. You can see this capsule here enclosed a circuit that told it how to encrypt and which shifts to make for each letter. So the operation was you would want to send a message to somebody in another part of the USSR. You just type it on this message, and it would come out as a strip with the encrypted message on it. However, because it's frickin' old computers used these punch cards to communicate with another computer. Oftentimes, it'd be their version of binary, basically. So when you encrypted a message, it would punch out these holes. So that way, not only could you like decipher it just by knowing the code, but you could also just run it through your own Fialka 125 M125 deciphering machine, and you'd be able to run it. So I have a video example of this, and that's this guy.
Somebody sent me a coded message, and it doesn't make any sense at all. I know what I'll do. I'll decipher it with my Soviet Fialka cipher machine.
So you can see he's got the tape loaded up, and it's got the message on it, but it's got a bunch of holes. So you just like put it through this little thing, and it would figure out the holes and then decipher the message. So you're going to see the encoded message and all the holes, and then the decoded message coming out the end here. You'll also be able to see all of these gears or all these wheels working to decipher it.
Yep.
Oh, also it's quite noisy, so watch your ears.
Got the tape loaded up in the tape reader. Let's see if we can make any sense out of it.
So there we go. We can use these strips of paper to just run them through our own machine, and every nation would have one of these machines. Another interesting thing to point out is that originally these were designed with Cyrillic letters, the Russian alphabet, that a lot of us are unfamiliar with. They also did make ones with Latin alphabet, so the alphabet that we use to make English. The reason for this was, obviously in the USSR, and some other places they would be using Cyrillic alphabet, but in East Germany, probably not so much. So they actually made one for the English alphabet, the Latin alphabet, as well as the Cyrillic alphabet as well. And so you could communicate through those. So let me just go over. Okay, so decoding efforts. This one was kind of really tricky to find. I couldn't really find anybody that decoded it while it was in service. We actually didn't really find out about this machine until like 2003 or something like that. The early 2000s. because it was kept secret, and I think a lot of that is due to in part of that it just looks like a regular old typewriter, right? And so I think that if you were to break into some super secret compound and you saw that it's just a typewriter, you know, you're not gonna give it a second glance. But like we said, and like we've seen, it's quite a complex machine. But it was kept secret. The entire machine was kept secret all throughout the Cold War, and it was only until like the Russians were just like, hey, by the way, we've been using this thing for like ever. I think basically what happened is in the 70s and 80s they used the Fialka M-125, and then they kind of redid it a little bit, and they used the M125 M3 until like I think like the late 90s. And then afterward they're like, well, we're not going to use this anymore. Hey, by the way, we have this machine. This is how you decode it. It's kind of useless to you now. But at any rate, that's the Fialka cipher. I'm just going to double check to make sure I didn't miss out on anything. Oh yeah, there's one more thing to say about it. So how to decode it? Okay, so I mentioned earlier that it has a computer chip in this end here that tells it exactly which things to shift and in what way. The interesting thing about decoding, when you were sending, you know, more vodka, please, to your comrade, that it would depend on what day of the month that you actually ciphered the message. So you'll have the message, you'll have the date. Usually you have a date on a message because that's kind of important. Context is everything. And so everybody would have this code book, and they would open it up and be like, oh, well, it was the second day of the month. So they would plug that into the Fialka Cypher machine. Sorry, the M125 Cypher machine. And that's how they would decode the message. If you didn't know what date they sent it on, you're kind of out of luck, but I'm assuming, again, because they're sending messages about military things or very sensitive things, time-sensitive things, that they would always put the date on there. And so you put the date on there, and that way you know exactly which setting to put it on to decipher and decode it. So again, it's 10 times more complicated than the Caesar cipher, but on top of that, you have all this like 30 days in a month, roughly, to figure that out as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and you'll see the infinite screen, and then goodbye.